and Hamlin gets by William Byron.
The only other car now, Byron, 1 point in front of Bell. Can Byron hold off Austin Dillon? Byron's playoff hopes are the last 13 laps holding off the 3 car. See what kind of patience Keselowski has with the two too wide in front of him.
There's a little push and shove going on there for that final, getting to this final lap. There's half a mile to go. Last week at these 2 corners, 3 and 4, he lost the lead and lost the chance. He lost sleep over it. Ryan Blaney's not losing anything here in Martinsville. He wins and is going to Phoenix. That was a determined, savvy drive. And look at that, right at the end, Christopher Bell drives his way in as well. He went for it, almost lost control, hits the wall, drives off the wall, sort of Ross Chastain-esque.
There'll be a lot of conversation in the NASCAR tower about the entire finish of this race.
We've got a decision. We've got a decision. Christopher Bell will not be going to Phoenix. Safety violation, riding the wall. It's against the rules. William Byron has been confirmed as the 4th and final position.
Let me tell you, that was way more than just a simple wall ride. While calling this race manipulation may seem like a harsh assessment of the situation, unfortunately, that is what this is. But this situation is very unique to a lot of other race manipulation scandals that have happened in the past. But what makes this situation unique is there wasn't just one group trying to manipulate the results, there were 2. And in this case, those 2 groups were 2 manufacturers, Toyota and Chevrolet. Shout out to Ford for not getting involved in this mess, but I don't want to give them too much credit, as if they had a horse in the race, they definitely would have gotten involved. Chevy and Toyota getting involved in these stunts may have created the most obvious and blatant form of race manipulation the sport of NASCAR has seen in their 76 years of history. It was so obvious that it created a scenario where we didn't even know who was officially in the Final Four until over 20 minutes after the race had ended. This sparked controversy that has not been seen since the 2013 Spingate incident that was curated by Mark Waltrip Racing. Outside of the controversy, the thing that connects these 2 events is Toyota's involvement. And since it's human nature to detect similarities and patterns, we'll start with Toyota's involvement in this whole scheme. And to make sure we have as much context as possible in this situation, we're going to travel back a couple weeks to Las Vegas. It's the first race of the round of 8, and Christopher Bell has had the race's dominant car heading into what was likely going to be the last pit stops of the day. He and crew chief Adam Stevens were presented with 2 options. Either pit for fresh rubber and gamble on having enough speed advantage to make up of the over 30 seconds of time lost to the drivers who took the other option, which was to stay out, save a bit of fuel, and hope there was not enough time to make up the gap lost in the pits. After leading over 150 laps, the 20 team decided to take the former option over the latter, diving into the pits to take 4 fresh tires. After a stall stop for the 22, Bell merged back on the track with 36 laps to go, a little over 30 seconds back of race leader Daniel Suarez. But Suarez wouldn't be the only driver Bell had to worry about, because only a few seconds behind Suarez was Joey Logano. Now, Logano being in this fight is scary for a number of reasons. The main one has to do with the fact that Logano had already pulled off an impressive fuel mileage win at Nashville earlier in the year. That factored into the fact that Logano has had a knack for making the Championship 4 in every even number of years since the Championship 4's inception, meaning winning this race would be a tall task for Bell even without the massive gap he is facing. For the next 30 laps, Bell would pick his way through the field, inching within 4 seconds of the leader. But with only 5 laps to go, the thing Bell didn't want to see happened, as Logano had gotten past the 99 of Suarez with some help from his Team Penske teammate, Ryan Blaney. But an undeterred Bell would continue fighting forward until the race had entered its final lap with Bell within a second of Logano. But despite this valiant effort, it would not be enough, as Bell would cross the line in second, only a couple of car lengths behind Logano. The normally tame Bell would react losing this race in a way that was very clear and uplifting.
You've got to be kidding me!
Honestly, I can't blame him. I would have said the same thing. Now, despite this frustrating loss, Bell still sat 42 points above the cut line heading into Homestead, where he would finish 4th. But crucially, he did lose some points due to a win from Tyler Reddick, who sat below the cut line heading into the race. But despite that, Bell would still have a solid gap above the cut line heading into Martinsville at 28 points, meaning all he would need was a solid mistake-free day at the paperclip and he would be able to advance into Phoenix. But oh boy, that was absolutely not how it would go for the 20 team. For starters, Bell would qualify all the way back in 16th, which was lowest of the 6 playoff drivers that weren't already locked into the Championship 4, meaning he would have some ground to make up early. And unfortunately for Bell, he would struggle to make up ground early. And to make matters even worse, on lap 77, he would go for a spin underneath Corey LaJoie, taking away all the little progress he had made up to that point. Not only was the spin completely on him, it also set the tone for the rest of the day, as later on during a pit stop under caution, the front tire changer failed to get the left wheel nut secured, causing Bell to have to bring his car back down pit road to get that wheel nut tightened, setting him back back to the tail end of the lead lap. And to put a cherry on top of this asphalt-covered Sunday, he would get trapped a lap down after pitting just a few laps before the caution came out. This would hinder Bell for the rest of the race, and it looked like the best possible finish he could muster was a 19th. And unfortunately, even though Byron was falling through the field, it looked like he was going to fall just one spot short of advancing, as it looked like the 24 car of William Byron had created some kind of force field that prevented his Chevy teammates from passing him. That was until conveniently, Bubba Wallace just so happened to slow in the last lap of the race, and Bell went by to get the one position he needed to advance the championship for. Or so that's what we thought, as it turns out there was some foul play on that final lap. And to be honest, I cannot possibly see where that foul play was. I mean, Bubba Wallace did magically have a tire going down when his crew chief Booty Barker told him that Bell was only 1 point out, but I'm sure that was completely unrelated. Wait, what? That's not what they were investigating? They were investigating this half-hearted wall ride that didn't really help Bell at all? Honestly, that is crazy. But before we get into that situation, we must discuss Chevy's involvement in this whole sham. Because, oh boy, were they not an innocent party in this whole thing. To discuss what Chevy did, we must go back to 14 laps to go, where Hamlin had just gotten by William Byron with ease, which meant the 24 was now only a single point above the cut line. And unfortunately for the 24 team, right behind him was the 3 of Austin Dillon. So surely this is going to spell doom for William Byron's championship hopes. But a couple laps have gone by, and Dillon still has not gotten by the 24 car. But Ross Chastain is closing, and there's no way he would let a free position go to waste like that. Well, a few more laps go by, and not only had Dillon nor Chastain gone by the 24, even though they were clearly faster, they were simultaneously side by side, creating a wall so RFK Racing driver Brad Keselowski wouldn't be able to make a move on them. Also, something of note is the fact that Carson Hocevar was just sitting on the outside of the 6. Now, I can't confirm nor deny any involvement that Hocevar had in this scheme, as far as I'm aware, there was no direct communication between the 77 and the 1 or the 3, but it's something that should be noted since Hocevar is a Chevy driver, and I haven't seen too many people bring this up. Plus, there are direct ties between Spire and HMS, but since he nor his team was penalized for this, I can't confirm any involvement in this. But no matter what the 77's involvement was, there was clearly something shady going on with the 3 and 1 teams. As expected, the last 10 laps would go by with no moves, and William Byron would make his way into the championship 4, until Bubba Wallace and Toyota pulled their part of the mess. Now that we're all caught up on the mess that happened on track, let's discuss the mess that happened off track. For over 20 minutes after the race had ended, no one knew whether William Byron or Christopher Bell had made the championship 4, because Bell had ridden the wall for a few feet after passing Bubba Wallace. That's right, the wait wasn't about Bubba Wallace magically losing a ton of pace on the final lap, or the magical force field that prevented Austin Dillon and Ross Chastain from passing William Byron. Instead, it was this dumb, half-assed wall ride. So NASCAR would proceed to waste a pretty substantial amount of our time trying to determine if there was a wall ride or not. But finally, after over 20 minutes of rubbing sticks together, or whatever the hell NASCAR does when trying to determine penalties, NASCAR ultimately came to the decision that it was in fact a wall ride. And Christopher Bell was docked 4 positions, which would ultimately remove him from the championship 4. Now, was this a wall ride? Technically. But it happened after the 20 had already gotten by the 23 and really didn't have any impact on Bell keeping his position, considering how slow Bubba Wallace was going. But since technically it was a wall ride, I can't fault NASCAR for penalizing him here. What I do have an issue with is the fact that William Byron and Chevy got to walk out of this scot-free. Even in the moment, it was pretty clear the 1 and 3 never had any intention of passing the 24. And on top of that, there were radio communications from both the 1 and 3 teams that pretty much confirmed this. If it were up to me, I would have thrown Byron out of the championship 4 just like they did to Bell. And to really drive this point home to Chevy, I wouldn't have put Larson in the final 4 either, and instead just made it a championship 3. I know this sounds pretty harsh since technically Larson nor Byron had anything to do with what Chevy did as a whole, but I feel giving Chevy what they ultimately wanted in this situation, which was the car in the championship 4, would not be enough to drive the point home that what they did would not be tolerated. I will get more into the penalties I think should have happened in a second, but first I want to discuss the penalties that were actually assessed to the team involved in this whole fiasco, starting with those who did the assistance: Ross Chastain, Austin Dillon, and Bubba Wallace. All 3 drivers were hit with a loss of 50 driver points and a $100,000 fine, with the same penalties being handed out to their owners. Additionally, the crew chiefs, spotters, and other key personnel were all suspended for Phoenix. All 3 of these teams appealed their penalties, but Trackhouse lost their appeal, while 2311 and RCR both was through theirs. While all these penalties were not quite to the nuke levels I wanted, it's something and might get the point across. I will say though, the suspensions for Phoenix were about as pointless as the grid penalty that Robert Schwartzman received during FP1 at the Mexico GP. I don't think suspending any of these personnel for races is really going to drive the point home to any of them, since to pretty much all of them, this race is completely meaningless. And with how long the season is, I doubt they're upset that they're going to get to take their hard-earned vacations a week early, with the only exception being Dave Rogers, as he is a higher up at 2311, and Tyler Reddick is competing for a championship. But outside of him, I don't think guys like Freddie Kraft and Brendan McReynolds are too upset. Now to the penalties handed out to Christopher Bell and William Byron, is what I would say if either of them were penalized, but they weren't. That's right, the two teams that benefited or almost benefited from this whole fiasco got to walk away from this completely scot-free or almost scot-free. I personally think that's ridiculous because even if they weren't the ones orchestrating this whole thing, they were still involved or at least guilty by association. I think not penalizing them is the worst thing NASCAR can do to get their point across, since them getting away with this and making the championship 4 is all both manufacturers wanted or cared about. The penalties to the team assisting the playoff teams are great and needed to happen, but at the end of the day, they were just collateral damage to those manufacturers because their races were pretty much meaningless. While it may be unfair to Bill and Byron that they're getting penalized for something that wasn't of their doing, you can't give anyone any reason to pull this BS. And while this may be harsh, if you really want to put a stop to this, I feel like NASCAR should have also kicked William Byron out of the championship 4. At the end of the day, getting William Byron in the championship 4 was the goal of this whole scheme, and kicking him out will hit them where it hurts, and in my eyes is the best way to deter anyone from trying this again. And that's why the penalty I would have handed out would not have put Larson in the championship 4 in place of Byron, and instead would just have 3 drivers heading into Phoenix instead of 4. Putting Larson in would still give HMS and Chevy what they wanted and would defeat the entire purpose of taking Byron out. But either way, this whole situation was a complete mess and reflects really poorly on the subject of my next video, the playoffs. And I hope this has opened some people's eyes to the issues of having a playoff system in racing. Alright, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you think of this whole situation in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the races.